Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, pouring your coffee and checking the local news, only to find out that the single main highway leading out of your city is completely blocked off.
Just totally shut down.
Exactly. Like nobody gets in, nobody gets out. Now, take that image and scale it up to a global level. Imagine that this single blocked off highway is responsible for supplying a full one-fifth of the entire world's energy.
That is a staggering amount.
It really is. I mean, everything from the gas in your car to the fuel for the cargo planes overhead to the manufacturing power of entire nations is suddenly completely bottlenecked.
And the crazy part is that this is the exact physical reality of what is happening right now in the Middle East. I mean, it sounds like the plot of some geopolitical thriller, but it's playing out in real time.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. That blocked highway we're talking about, well, that's the situation unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz right now.
Right.
2 U.S. Navy warships have just sailed straight into a highly contested, explosive-laden zone to keep the world's oil flowing.
Yeah, it's incredibly tense.
So our goal today, we are taking a dense dispatch from Agence France-Presse out of Washington, and we're decoding it for a total beginner. We are cutting through all the diplomatic jargon to figure out the physical reality on the water.
Which is so important because to understand the headlines, we really have to strip away that jargon and look at the actual ships, the water, and, well, the explosives.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. The core subject here is a highly tense mine clearance mission in the Strait of Hormuz. But before we get to the warships and the underwater drones...
Because there are drones.
Oh, there are definitely drones. But before that, we need to understand the board this game is being played on. Like, why does this specific patch of salt water matter to someone listening right now?
Well, because geography dictates global economics,
Right.
right? So the Strait of Hormuz is this strategic waterway located just off the coast of Iran,
Okay.
and it connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, which then opens up to the open ocean. It is basically the textbook definition of a global choke point.
I always picture it like a giant hourglass.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. You have these massive wide oceans on either side where ships have plenty of room to maneuver. But all the sand, and in this case the sand is massive oil tankers and global commerce, it all has to pass through this tiny, fragile little neck in the middle.
Exactly. And the statistic in the AFP report is just staggering. 20% of the world's crude oil supply moves through this one spot.
Wait, 20%. If 1/5 of the world's energy goes through a single narrow passage, I mean, isn't the entire global economy essentially operating on a massive vulnerability?
Oh, it absolutely is. What's fascinating here is that the entire modern global economy relies on the underlying assumption that the sand just keeps flowing through that hourglass neck uninterrupted.
Right.
When it stops, or even when there's just a threat that it might stop, the shock waves hit the markets instantly.
Instant panic.
Totally. The source we were looking at actually quotes the U.S. Central Command, CETCOM, their commander, Admiral Brad Cooper.
Okay, what did he say?
He stated that the military's goal right now is establishing a new safe passage, and that they plan to share this pathway with the maritime industry to encourage the free flow of commerce.
Encourage the free flow of commerce. I mean, that is a very sanitized military way of saying we need to get the highway open again before the global economy stalls out and prices skyrocket.
Yeah, that gets right to the heart of the why here. A physical blockade in a choke point doesn't just, strand a few ships.
It's way bigger than that.
Right. It triggers a panic in the markets. The price of oil is largely speculative. It's based on future availability.
Sure.
So if buyers think that 20% of the daily supply is suddenly trapped behind a wall of explosives, well, the cost of everything that relies on oil goes up.
Which is practically everything we consume.
Exactly.
So we have this vital hourglass neck. But how did it get blocked with explosive sea mines in the first place? Like, how did we get here?
Well, according to the AFP report, this crisis traces back to a very specific date, February 28th. That is when a U.S.-Israeli war with Iran began, and that was marked by bombings on Iran.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was immediately following those bombings that the water basically became a minefield.
So the timeline is pretty clear there. The bombings happen and then the mines go in.
Correct. Following the start of those bombings, Tehran responded by laying sea mines in the Strait of Hormuz.
And just like that, the highway is closed.
Yeah, by doing so, they virtually blocked the key shipping lane. I mean, any commercial vessel attempting the passage would be risking total destruction.
But, the report also mentions that currently there is a shaky ceasefire in place.
Yes, a shaky ceasefire.
And this is where the logic just starts to break down for me. The report says that reopening the strait was actually a condition of this shaky ceasefire.
Right.
Wait, so there is a ceasefire,
Okay.
and reopening the water was a condition of it, but the U.S. is sending heavily armed warships to clear the mines.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, if everyone agreed the highway should be open, shouldn't there be some kind of coordinated effort? Sending in warships sounds incredibly tense and, not at all like a peaceful resolution.
Well, you've hit on the defining tension of this entire crisis. To understand why it's so volatile, we really need to look at a detail brought in from Axios, which was cited in that AFP report.
Okay, what did Axios say?
That report states this U.S. clearance operation was not coordinated with authorities in Tehran.
Wait, really? Meaning they aren't talking to each other at all about how to defuse these bombs?
Not directly, no. And that perfectly illustrates the strategic reality of a shaky ceasefire.
It's not actually peace.
Right, it's not a sudden era of trust, it's a standoff. In game theory, when trust is at absolute zero, you don't wait for the other side to hand over the map of their minefields.
You just go in.
Exactly. You take unilateral action to secure your own interests, in this case, the flow of oil. The U.S. is moving in to fulfill the condition of reopening the strait, but they're doing so without a direct handover.
Wow. This means one side is operating inside a contested zone, clearing the other side's weapons without a clear line of communication,
Yeah.
which means those two U.S. Navy ships are sailing totally blind into an active minefield, just hoping the other side recognizes they're only there to clean up and not to start shooting again.
It is an incredibly nerve-wracking picture of the environment.
It really is, and that brings up a massive tactical question for me. Let's look at the actual hardware the U.S. Navy sent in to do this job.
Let's do it.
So, the operation was announced by CMTCOM on Saturday, and this marks the first U.S. naval transit through the strait since the war began back on February 28th.
Right.
And the specific ships they sent are the USS Frankie Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy.
Well, both of those are Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The article actually includes a file photo from March 18th showing the Peterson sailing in the Arabian Sea. And, it is just a massive, heavily armed piece of machinery.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because if I'm a Navy commander, a cheap sea mine is my worst nightmare.
Oh, definitely.
A billion-dollar ship can be totally crippled by a relatively inexpensive explosive floating in the water. So why on earth would you send the biggest, most expensive targets in the fleet to do the sweeping?
It sounds counterintuitive.
It does. When you think of clearing mines, you think of small, specialized boats or, people in heavy suits doing delicate work. Sending a guided missile destroyer to clear a minefield feels like sending heavily armored SWAT vehicles to do the delicate work of a bomb squad.
The SWAT analogy is actually a great way to look at it, but you have to extend it to understand the mechanics of the operation.
Okay, how so?
Well, you wouldn't send a SWAT vehicle to clip the wires on a bomb, but if that bomb is sitting in the middle of a contested zone where snipers might be watching from the rooftops...
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you absolutely send the SWAT vehicle to provide an armored umbrella while the bomb squad does their work.
Ah, okay. So the destroyers aren't necessarily the ones poking around in the mud looking for the explosives.
Right. CNSCOM actually noted in their Saturday announcement that additional U.S. forces, including underwater drones, could join the effort in the coming days.
So the drones are the bomb squad.
Exactly. The underwater drones are the bomb squad. They do the delicate, precise mechanical work of locating the mines.
How do they even do that?
Well, typically, these drones use sonar to map the seafloor or the water column. They identify the anomalies, and then they either cut the mooring lines of the mines or detonate a small charge next to them to neutralize the threat safely.
Wow, so the drones are looking down, doing the surgical work, but then what are the Arleigh Burke destroyers doing?
They are looking up and out.
Okay.
Because this is an uncoordinated zone with a zero-trust ceasefire, the U.S. Navy has to prepare for multiple worst-case scenarios simultaneously.
They have to be ready for anything.
Yeah, the destroyers are there because of their advanced radar and missile systems. You have to scan the horizon for fast attack boats, monitor the airspace for incoming threats, and protect the drones doing the sweeping.
So it's a multi-dimensional operation.
It really is. They are basically disarming a tripwire while actively guarding against a potential ambush.
It's an incredibly delicate balance of, projecting overwhelming force while trying to perform a surgical cleanup.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Which brings us to a whole other layer of this situation. The military is doing the highly dangerous physical clearing of the mines on the water. But how is this volatile operation being framed to the global public by political leadership?
That is a fascinating shift.
Because, the rhetoric surrounding a military action like this often reveals the broader geopolitical strategy.
Oh, absolutely. And we can see that strategy clearly in the statements made by U.S. President Donald Trump, which the AFP report details from his Truth Social platform.
Right.
The language he uses provides a very specific and, honestly, heavily contrasting lens on the event.
Okay, let's break down the actual quotes. The report says President Trump announced Washington had started clearing out the strait. But he framed this mission as a favor to other nations. Like specifically, he called out countries like China, Japan, and France.
He did. The report quotes him directly stating that these nations, China, Japan, and France, don't have the courage or will to do this work themselves.
Okay, let's unpack the logic there. He's openly criticizing major global powers, essentially calling them cowards, while simultaneously using U.S. military hardware and personnel to do the dangerous work that benefits their economies just as much as ours.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a textbook example of utilizing a military operation to project global dominance.
Okay.
The framing here positions the United States as the sole, indispensable guarantor of global shipping. By saying other nations lack the courage or will, the rhetoric claims the moral and physical high ground.
Right, it's sending a message.
Yeah, it's a way of telling the international community, your economies only function because our Navy is willing to do the dangerous work you won't.
But the rhetoric gets even more fascinating when he talks about Iran's position. The report notes that Trump insisted Iran is losing big in the conflict. However, right after claiming absolute victory, he acknowledged the physical threat of the mines in a very, unusual way.
Very unusual.
The exact quote is, "The only thing they have going is the threat that a ship may bunk into one of their sea mines."
And the word choice there is really the key to the messaging strategy.
Bunk.
Yeah. Using a casual, almost playful word like bunk to describe a ship hitting a sea mine is a very deliberate rhetorical device.
Because in physical reality, a ship bunking into a sea mine is a catastrophic event.
Oh, totally.
It tears a hole in the hull, it sinks the vessel, lives are lost, and millions of gallons of crude oil pour into the ocean.
Exactly. But if a political leader acknowledges the severity of the enemy's weapon, it elevates the enemy's status.
Ah, I see.
By minimizing the threat linguistically, shrinking a devastating explosion down to a mere bump or bunk in the night, the messaging maintains the narrative of total dominance.
Wow, that's a stark contrast. Sending billion-dollar destroyers and advanced underwater drones to deal with a threat that is simultaneously being described as a minor nuisance.
It's cognitive dissonance on a global scale.
Truly. And there is one final piece of messaging the report highlights from an earlier post by Mr. Trump.
What does he say?
He stated that empty tankers were headed to the United States from around the world to purchase oil.
Right.
So connect this all together for me. We have the U.S. Navy doing a highly dangerous favor for countries like China and France and the Middle East, while empty tankers rush to the U.S. to buy oil. What is the ultimate message being broadcast here?
It is a projection of absolute economic and military supremacy.
Okay.
On one hand, the U.S. is the sword, clearing the world's most vital waterway because no one else can. On the other hand, the U.S. is the shield, providing the actual energy resources, the oil, to a desperate global market.
That makes a lot of sense.
The rhetoric positions the United States as both the protector of the old supply chains in the Middle East and the new secure source of energy back home.
It's just wild to look at the massive gulf between the political language used on social media and the terrifying physical reality experienced by the sailors on those Arleigh Burke destroyers.
It really is.
I mean, the political messaging is designed to project total casual control, but the sailors are staring at radar screens in an uncoordinated zone, knowing that one wrong move by an underwater drone means a massive detonation.
And that separation between rhetoric and reality is exactly why we have to look closely at the underlying mechanics of these headlines.
Right.
Because the story isn't just the ceasefire. It's the fact that a ceasefire still requires heavily armed warships to act as an umbrella while robots hunt for hidden explosives.
We've covered a massive amount of ground here today.
We really have.
We started with the sheer geographical reality of the Strait of Hormuz, that vital hourglass neck where 20% of the world's crude oil gets squeezed through a tiny passage.
Mm.
And we looked at the timeline of the U.S.-Israeli bombings on February 28th, followed by Tehran mining the water, leading to a highly fragile, uncoordinated ceasefire.
Yeah, and we dug into the tactical logic of the operation itself, understanding why you have to send guided missile destroyers to provide a radar umbrella while underwater drones do the surgical bomb squad work of clearing the shipping lanes.
And finally, we analyzed the high-stakes political messaging, contrasting claims of global favors and a leasing big adversary with the very real catastrophic threat of sea mines.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And I want to circle back to you, the person listening right now, to remind you why this matters.
Absolutely.
Because when you hear about foreign straits, drone operations, and ceasefires, it can feel abstract, like a movie playing out on another planet.
Sure, it feels far away.
But that hourglass neck dictates the cost of manufacturing a phone in your pocket right now. It dictates the cost of shipping the groceries to your local store. And it directly dictates the price of the gas you put in your car.
It's all connected.
Exactly. A
Good enough.
conflict on the exact opposite side of the world hits your wallet directly.
Our world is heavily interconnected, but, the physical pathways that connect it are remarkably fragile.
They really are.
Which brings up a critical final thought I'll leave you with today.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this time dissecting the incredible military effort, the advanced drones, and the billions of dollars in hardware required just to let a commercial oil tanker sail safely from point A to point B.
Right.
If the entire engine of modern global commerce relies so heavily on a single narrow waterway that it takes an uncoordinated standoff and a massive fleet of warships just to keep the lights on,
Yeah.
how fragile is our global supply chain really? Are we relying on a highly vulnerable 20th century physical choke point to try and run a 21st century world?